So good morning, everyone. So we have a small part of Carnot engine, basically kind of tail of Carnot engine is left. So we'll finish some part of Carnot engine and then we move on to electrostatics today. And so this is what yesterday we briefly talked about Carnot engine operating in series. So I'll just discuss in little more detail so that any other variation also you should be able to understand and solve. Okay. So what you see here, so this one Carnot engine E1 here, and there's another engine E2. They are operated in series. So basically output from the heat which is rejected by E1 becomes the heat input by E2. They operate in series. Engine A, so this is engine A, receives heat from the reservoir. This is 600 K. So if I call this as a T1 temperature, so T1 is equal to 600 K and rejects heat to reservoir at temperature T. In between, this is temperature T and engine B receives heat rejected by A and in turn rejects the heat to reservoir at 100 K. So this is how they are operating. Okay, and this is I can call this maybe the T2 here. Okay, and these are two engine A and B. See, if we want to understand in terms of PV diagram also, let's just go through that part again. See, this is temperature T1. So this is source temperature. And let's see, this is here it is given as 600 K. And other side is a sink temperature. So basically two heat sources are available. So just like these two water tanks, there are two heat tanks. And we can draw heat from one and dump the heat into other, and in the process get the work done. So basically that's what it does. It draws heat and gets the work done out of work. So we need two sources with temperature difference, and we can use the temperature difference for getting work done in terms of mechanical work done. And this kind of process. See, number of things we can understand from here, even if I don't draw the red line. So these are here, these are the two isotherms. These two isotherms are based on source temperature and sink temperature. Now, when we start a process from here, see basically what we do from here. See, if you look from, this is the lowest volume and this is the highest volume. So from here, this entire part here is expansion and this part is compression. So you notice here, see, when we draw adiabatic process, adiabatic curve, I could have drawn, it could be somewhere else also. But if a adiabatic process is, we start from here, in that case, what will happen if we shift the whole thing curve here? What will happen in that case? Compression ratio will change. So basically, what is the gap between two adiabatic process and what is the area enclosed? Area enclosed may vary depending on what is the expansion ratio, and expansion ratio is actually driven by compression ratio. All this heat engine operate using a compressor, something like that. So basically there has to be compression also here. So we can have different adiabatic curve between two same isotherm. Moment we have source and sink, isotherm curves are fixed. We can have different adiabatic curves, and those adiabatic curves depends on what kind of machine we are using for compressing. That is one thing. Second thing we notice here, I have drawn this adiabatic curve. Suppose I have drawn this curve for adiabatic curve for, I have drawn it for particular this volume, and I draw one more adiabatic curve here. So one more adiabatic curve as I was showing here. If I draw a second, what is the difference between first case and second case? In second case, what is happening? First case, this was the volume. Now the total area enclosed by the curve is increasing. So basically in this case, if rather than following this process, if I follow the dotted line process, source and sink temperature are same. But what has happened? Total heat which is drawn in from the source. This was the heat drawn in corresponding to this point to this point. So as I go further from here, as the ratio of volume increases in this phase, this is a phase when we draw energy. As the ratio of volume increases, Q1 value also will increase. But as Q2 increases, Q1 increases, from here Q2 also increase in the same proportion. Hence, the ratio of Q1 and Q2 remains same. Ratio of Q1 Q2 depends on T1 and T2. So it doesn't matter where we, how do I draw two adiabatic curves. Second point is what would happen if I change the gas? Rather than having monatomic gas, if I had diatomic gas, will the efficiency change? If I have diatomic gas, the curve will become flatter. This curve will become flatter. And corresponding, this curve also become flatter. Even then, in that case also, efficiency ratio of Q1 and Q2 is not dependent on gamma value. Efficiency remains same. Only thing what will happen if this volume ratio, heat drawn may, basically if you have flatter curve here, the values of final volumes will change. Temperature values will not change. So you understand this curve here. Isotherm curves are fixed because of source and sink temperature. Adiabatic curves depend on what volumes we use, what is the compression and expansion we use. Now coming back to two in series. Let's understand what does two in series mean. Two in series mean this is the source and this is sink. In between, we are introducing one more intermediate heat source and sink. It is equivalent to drawing one more isotherm. So this is something, this is T1 here is corresponding to 600 and this is T here. When I draw the T here, just understand what happens here. So what does engine A do here? Engine A from here to here, it draws heat. And if I make T as intermediate temperature, then it will have an adiabatic expansion and then it will reject heat from here. So what is the, see if I split into two parts, this is engine A, it goes like this, it goes like this, and it goes like this. And this is the process when it is throwing away heat, which is Q2. For engine B operates between T and T2. And most cases they say the heat rejected by first engine becomes heat received by the second engine. So for that to happen, the second engine also should operate between which two volumes? If we have same number of moles, it has to operate this first engine, it goes in the reverse cycle. The second engine engine B will operate like this. So it will have from this point to Can you all see the screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So again, power supply tripped and the connection went away. So hopefully, okay. Now coming back to what happens if we split into two parts. So when I was just coming to this, for these two engines to be equal, if I call this point as 1, 2, and this point is 3 and 4, and this point 5 and 6. See what has to happen, as we talked yesterday, if the second one also receives exactly same amount of heat as rejected, ratio of V2 by V1 has to be equal to V3 by V4 and has to be equal to V5 by V6. That is something I think it question may come another form also. Then only heat rejected and heat received will be equal. Okay. Now coming back to if those ratios are equal, if I talk about what is Q1 here, again I'm just recap of thermodynamics. Q1 will be equal to nR T1 into log of V2 by V1. And this ratio, and similarly, what is the heat transfer here, Q2? Q2 will be equal to, if I take its magnitude, it will be nRT log of V3 by V4. For engine A, it will be negative. For engine B, it will be positive to receive heat. And similarly, Q3 here, which is thrown away, Q3 will be equal to nRT2 log of V5 by V6. And since all these terms are equal, I can write this one K1 is equal to some constant equal into T1. Q2 is equal to some constant into T2, T here. And this will be equal to some constant into T2. So everywhere in the process, heat is proportional to temperature. So this is something, and this is what happens in case of gas. So I discussed various varieties, why, how heat drawn may change, how the work done may change, what is the effect of the compression ratio, what is the effect of change of gas, and what is the effect of splitting into two intermediate ranges. If this T is higher, suppose this intermediate T is higher, what will happen? The whole curve will shift upwards. If T is higher, what will happen? Work done by first engine will be much smaller compared to the second engine. So you understand effect of choice of T here. So this is how the ratio of work done depends on work done by first engine and second engine, depends on this temperature T. The lower the value of T is, higher the work done by the first engine. So let's what is here. Now we come back to the same question here. If A receives heat at 600 K and all, so this is all general discussion, not only this question, other questions also. The question is efficiency of two engines, A and B are eta A and eta B. And what has to be value of eta and eta B so that both engine deliver equal work. Okay, so let's understand what is happening here, what we have drawn here. This is Q1, this is Q2, and this amount also is Q2, and this is Q3. And this is work done, which is Q1 minus Q2. So Q1, I can write K into 6, it will be equal to 600 into some constant. So it will be K into 600. This will be equal to K into T, temperature. Everywhere I'm writing this heat and all to be proportional temperature. What would work done be? Work done will be equal to some constant K. I'm taking K as a constant of proportion into this temperature minus T. So this work done will be equal to 600 minus T. And Q2 will be equal to K into T. And Q3 will be equal to K into 100 temperatures. So all K multiplied by corresponding temperature. So this work done will be equal to K into T minus 100. This is what we had done yesterday. And if both deliver equal work, what is the condition which must hold good? These two values must be equal, from which I arrive that temperature T has to be equal to mean temperature. Sorry, T minus 100 here. So what is the T value? We get T is equal to 300. So once I get T is equal to 300, I can calculate efficiency of first one. I can calculate efficiency of second one. So that part was simple. Once we have temperature T, efficiency of A will be equal to 1 minus lower temperature by higher temperature, 300 by 600. And similarly, I can calculate efficiency of B engine also, 1 minus 100 by 300. So I can calculate those efficiencies. But all other things also should be understood. And this is something why I write heat as proportional to temperature. This is the reason why I can write heat to be proportional to temperature. Okay, now coming to some question. Now, second part is refrigerator. In case of heat engine, it runs in the clockwise fashion. If we run Carnot engine in reverse direction, in that case, what will happen? The whole process, wherever heat is being received by gas, here heat will be rejected by the gas. And work done also, sign will change. So when we see every term, sign will change here. So in this case, previous case, it used to heat engine used to receive net heat, and net heat used to turn into net work done here. So there used to be gas used to do net work. In case of refrigerator, net work will be done on the gas, or work done by the gas on the surrounding is negative. And the second thing, it will actually reject net heat, something like a refrigerator. So when you operate refrigerator, you notice here near the refrigerator, if you look the whole thing, it will, that's why sometimes we ask the question, if you have a refrigerator in the room, will the room temperature, and if you keep the door open also, what will happen to room temperature? Room temperature will rise. Why room temperature will rise? Because refrigerator, dq for the gas is negative. Gas doesn't receive heat, gas rejects heat. So it's reverse of heat engine. Let's do that. So in this case, refrigerator operated in the reverse cycle. What is the input here? So basically in this case also, what was Q1 here? This is Q1 in the reverse direction. And Q2 where the heat was rejected, now the heat will come in. This is Q2. This what will, and work done also will be equal to how much work done will be equal to? Work done also will be negative. So Q1 also negative, Q2. And so work done will be equal to, let's look at this. So when we talk about refrigerator, what is the useful output for refrigerator? Think of it. What is the useful output for the refrigerator? This is lower temperature, and just imagine this is T2 and this is T1. And if I draw heat also, earlier I have drawn, in case of heat engine, we draw Q1 direction arrow like this. Here that arrow direction will be like this, Q1. And here also arrow direction will be like this, Q2. So what does this indicate? Heat is drawn from lower temperature source. So heat is drawn away from refrigerated box. It is refrigerated compartment. And this Q1 is heat rejected to the surrounding. So when you look at operation of a typical refrigerator at home, what is T2? T2 is the temperature inside the refrigerated compartment. And what is T1? Typically, it rejects the heat to the air temperature. So it draws heat from inside the refrigerator and dumps the heat to the surrounding. And if this is the nature here, and even the W also direction changes. What is this work? This is the work done by the compressor. So this transfer of heat is made possible because of the compression, because whole thing reverse in the reverse order. Now let's look at this. What is input and what is output? What do we use refrigerator for? Our input, the purpose of refrigerator is this, removal of heat. So this is, as far as refrigerator is concerned, this is the output, and how this output is made possible because of this work done compressor. Thus the compressor works based on electric supply. So this is the input and this is the output. So when we talk of refrigerator, we don't talk of efficiency, we talk about coefficient of performance, which is output by input. Output is Q2, input is W. And if I put in terms of temperature, this is proportional to K into T2. This is K into T1. And of course, this becomes equal to K into T1 minus T2, difference of the two. So what is the coefficient of performance? This term divided by this term, which is nothing but T2 divided by T1 minus T2, or I can call this lower temperature divided by higher temperature minus lower temperature. That's a coefficient of performance. And if you understand this, absolutely nothing to memorize, and you will not go wrong also. Let's look at some application of coefficient of performance. And coefficient of performance can be greater than 1. That's why I use the term not efficiency, we use coefficient of performance. Let's look at some questions. So here, a Carnot engine works as a refrigerator. These are the two temperatures. 250 K is what? 250 K is roughly minus 23 degrees centigrade. And 300 is 27 K, 27 degrees centigrade. So this is something what we assume here. This is the temperature inside the refrigerated compartment, and this is the air temperature. So these numbers are typical of what happens in a real life refrigerator. It works between these two temperatures. It receives a 500 calorie heat from the reservoir at a low temperature. It means how much heat it has received from the refrigerator in one cycle. This is the amount of heat it has received removed from the refrigerator. What is the amount of work to be done in each cycle? What is this term given? This term is nothing but if I use my normal convention, Q1, Q2 and work done, this term is Q2. This is the heat removed from lower temperature source. If I draw, this is 250K, this is 300K, and this is where from it removes heat from here, and it dissipates heat to the surrounding, and there's a compressor which gets work done here. And if the numbers are, these numbers are K into 250, this number will be equal to K into 300, and this number will be K into 50. So what we understand from here? If we understand from here, if I have to calculate coefficient of performance in this case, what will be coefficient of performance here? Output by input. What is output and what is input here? This term, this is heat removal is my output purpose of refrigerator. Let me put this value. So that will be equal to K into 250. And what is the input here? K into 50. So if this is a case which is operating, is the coefficient of performance is 5. So every 1 unit of heat removal, it need to do work which is 1/5 of the heat removed. That's what it has to do. So what is the amount of work done? If this is 500, this is 1/5 of this. So it will be only, okay, Q2 is 500. And hence what will be work done? Work done is 50 into K. And work done will be equal to, so what will work done here? 1/5 of that. Work done is 1/5 of this. And 1/5 of this will be equal to 100 cal. Okay. Next one, this is also similar question, nothing much, too much of variation here. Carnot freezer takes heat from water at 0 degree inside. In this case, it is not negative temperature, it is 0 degree. And it rejects it to room at a temperature of 27. So what does it imply here? What are the temperatures here? This is 273. Every time you use Kelvin. And this is equal to 300 K. Okay. And latent heat, how it draws heat from here at 0 degree. And what does this contain here? If this contains water at 0 degree, what will happen if you remove heat? Water at 0 degree will turn into ice. It will turn into ice at 0 degree. So that's what is happening here. It is at 0 degree only. So it removes heat. A latent heat of ice is given if 5 kg of water at 0 degrees converted into ice at 0 degree by freezer. So indirectly, this entire sentence, what does it tell you? This entire part of the sentence, tell me value of Q2. I can find value of Q2 from here. And all the temperatures are there. Once I find the value of Q2, and since the temperatures are known, I can find out what is the corresponding work done. I can also find out how much heat it will throw away to surrounding air. Okay, so Q2 here is K into, okay, Q2 is given in form of ml. I can substitute, I can find Q2 in terms of joules. And based on that, I can also calculate energy consumed by the freezer. What will the ratio of energy consumed? Q2 is proportional to K into 273. And work done is proportional to K into 27. So what will be the work done? Work done will be equal to 27 by 273 times of heat removed. That will be the work done. So very simple ratios. Okay. Okay, and this I think I already discussed in place of monatomic gas, if you use diatomic gas between the same temperature, if ratios of volume compressions are same, efficiency is independent of basically what kind of gas is used. The efficiency, it will only depend on the temperature of sink and source. And if engine extracts 1000 kg of heat. So if this amount is given, if Q1 is given here, work done, if Q1 is same for monatomic gas as well as diatomic gas, then Q2 also will be same and work done also will be same. How would that be same? If this is the curve for monatomic gas, what will the shape for diatomic gas? Can you all think of, in your mind, think of what will the shape for a diatomic gas? Heat, this is same. If heat drawn from the source is same, it means for diatomic gas also end point and beginning point will be same. But from here, how it would go for diatomic, adiabatic curve is flatter. So diatomic, this curve would have gone like this. So diatomic gas, the curve will go like this. And corresponding in the compression phase also, diatomic gas curve will be like this. So solid line indicates monatomic of gas and dotted line indicates diatomic gas. Both the cases, what you'll find here, area enclosed is same. Q1 is same, and even this Q2 also will come same. Only thing, the shape of curve will change. Okay. One question on general calculation of efficiency of a heat engine. Heat engine operates. This is not a Carnot engine, but principle I think we discussed yesterday. How do we calculate efficiency of any heat engine? Heat engine operates taking n moles of ideal gas through this cycle. This is the cycle here. It is non-PV diagram. It means all four steps are constant volume and constant pressure kind of constant volume and constant pressure process. What is the thermal efficiency of the engine? If we have to calculate all such cases, if I add one more thing here, what is the one more thing add here? These are the only pressure and volume values are given. I'll add one more thing here. I'll add a term T naught here. And what would T naught be equal to? If I take point A, P naught V naught is equal to NR T naught. So I am assuming T naught to be equal to P naught V naught by NR. So whenever such curves are given, we'll assume temperature at one point. And once this is assumed, rest all can easily be formed. If this temperature is T naught, here this temperature will become equal to 2 T naught. And here the temperature becomes equal to 4 T naught. And what will this temperature here? P naught into 2E, this will become equal to 2 T naught. Because everywhere I'm taking product of, it will change in the proportion of product and volume. Here P naught V naught, here 2 P naught V naught, that's why it becomes twice. This point is equal to 2 P naught into 4 P naught V naught, so it becomes 4 T naught. Once I have temperature here, and let's see, this is the direction where the process takes place. So let's do one thing. So to find efficiency of the heat engine, what is the efficiency of the heat engine? Output is area. Work done I can calculate as area itself. So area enclosed by the curve will give me the work done here, which I can easily calculate. What is the area here? Delta y is equal to P naught, delta x is equal to V naught. So work done is equal to P naught, V naught. Work done we know already. Second thing, what I need to calculate, I need to calculate what is the input in form of heat which is given to the system. To calculate this out of four processes, I need to identify which are the steps heat is given to the gas, which part Q is positive, which part Q is negative. So I will add up only the positive part of Q. So let's start from here. A to B, Q is positive. I think all of you should easily understand Q1 is positive here. Here also it is going above adiabatic curve. So this also Q1 is positive, and this part also Q2 also is positive. Heat is going into the gas. What is happening from process C to D? If I visualize an adiabatic curve, it is going below adiabatic curve. So here heat is being rejected. So Q3 negative, and this Q4 also is negative. So what is my efficiency? Efficiency, I need to, what is Q parameter? I need to only add Q1 plus Q2. This is my efficiency. And how do I calculate Q1? Q1, I have know the temperature, I know the process. Q1 is constant volume process. So Q1 will be equal to N into CV into delta T. And very easy, we can get that number. And moles, CV is equal to what kind of gas? It is, yeah, CV is given 1.5 R, R by 2, 3 R by 2 into delta T. Delta T is equal to T naught. I get Q1. And how do I get Q2 also? Q2 is constant pressure process. I'll add NCV delta T. So I get Q1 and Q2. So this would be my efficiency. So any process we can calculate efficiency. Work done is area enclosed by the process, cyclic process. And here to find the denominator, we need to identify the processes where Q value is positive, and we take only the positive terms, input. Output term we don't subtract, because if you want to understand why don't we subtract the negative value of heat, you understand when we have a refrigerator heat is thrown away to the surrounding. It is basically, where does the heat go? You stand near to refrigerator or stand near to the compressor of an AC, you will find heat is being rejected. Is that heat useful? Is that of any practical use? No. Most cases, the heat rejected is a waste. That's why we don't take the net of it. We take only the positive part. Okay. We don't subtract. Okay. Now coming to next part. So that's end of thermodynamics. Let's go to electrostatics. and I will do some of the questions which are there. So electrostatic theory part, see electrostatics also, basic theory part is, initial part is very similar to gravitation. So I'm not going to repeat that part. And I've sent some kind of short note sheet today. So basically how to calculate force, what is field, and then after calculation of field, what is potential energy, what is potential, variation of potential and potential energy in case of spherical cases. And in case of electric, these things are all common. You should understand how to calculate potential energy is negative of work done by conservative force. How to calculate potential, it is negative of work done by electric field. All such cases are same. So we are not going to repeat that part. We'll just look at numericals, some quick numericals, and I will just give a hint so that we cover more of those. What is the smallest electric force between two charges placed at a distance of 1 meter? So this is based on the two charges Q1 and Q2. If they are placed at a distance of 1 meter, so this is about basic law. And law tells you force between the point charge only. It doesn't give for any other shape. And this is the value of forces. Magnitude of force is this is the term. And just to recap, this term is 9 into 10 to the power 9 in SI unit. And if I have to write in terms of vector form, just quickly look at how do I write force in the vector form. So if a vector form, if I have a coordinate system, if there are two charges, this charge is Q, the Q1 and Q2. If I have to calculate force on the second particle, if I have to calculate F21, F21 will be equal to K times first charge, second charge with sign, divided by R square the distance, and then I have to multiply with what? A unit vector. Which unit vector? Unit vector of towards second charge with respect to the first charge. How do I write the unit vector? If this point is A and this point is B, I can first write this vector. What is the vector here? The vector is, if the point is 2, corresponding position vector minus RA divided by RB minus RA. And in this case, if I write like this, it is true for all sign. If Q1, Q2 both are positive, this will be the direction. If both are opposite sign, still the force is repulsive, still is valid. So this is valid for all four combination of sign of charges, and we can find whenever you need to find in vector form. In case of magnitude, very simple, and this is something unit vector. So when is the force smallest? Here, force will be smallest. Distance is given, this is given. Force is smallest when the charge is smallest. And what is the smallest possible charge? Smallest possible charge is charge of electron. Really simple question. Let's look at second part. Two charges Q1 and Q2 are placed at point 0, 0 and 0 t. So let me take see. So we are taking two charges are placed, and I'm taking four different combination. When two charges are equal, so two charges Q and Q, equal charges are placed at a distance d here. Okay, so this is what is given. Now, what is asked in all cases, where should I place the third charge so that it remains in equilibrium? This question is same as what is the position of a point where the field due to these two charges are zero, both are one and the same thing. So either I say where should the third charge Q be placed so that it remains in equilibrium, or same question can be worded, find position of point where field is zero. Position of point where field is zero. So we'll take all combination. Let's quickly understand from here. See, first of all, the point where force can be zero will only lie on the line. So first we need to check if I take any particular point here, if I place charge here, the force, if these two charges are the same sign, if I place a charge outside those two lines joining two, the force exerted both will be in the same direction. If it is positive charge and both are positive, both forces will be repulsive. It cannot be zero. So when the signs, when both the charges are of the same sign, the field can be zero only somewhere between the two charges, because in between two only the direction of fields are opposite when they are of the same sign. So third charge, where should I place here? It should come somewhere in between if the charges are of the same sign. If charges are equal, midpoint. What happens? So if direction must be opposite. So between two charges for similar charges, what happens if charges are not similar? So I've taken, if charges are, okay, I come to this case last. What happens if one charge is Q, other charge is 4Q? Both are the same sign. Where should I place the third charge so that it remains in equilibrium? Charges are of the same sign. It cannot be here, it cannot be here. It has to be in between the two. And third charge should be nearer to the smaller charge. It will always be nearer to the smaller charge. So if this distance is A and this distance is B and this charge is Q, so K into Q by capital Q divided by A square has to be in terms of magnitude. See, once I choose a position, direction forces already become opposite. So sign we are taken care of. Now we are just equating the magnitude. If I equate the magnitude into 4Q by B square. So very easily we can find the position of equilibrium. This is a very simple question. One only part, last part, what we want to do here. If charges are like this, if one is Q and second is minus 4Q and the distance is D, where should I place the third charge so that it remains in equilibrium? When charges are the opposite sign, it cannot be anywhere in between the two, because anywhere in between the two, both forces become in the same direction. It has to be either this side or this side. Even this side also is not possible. If I place charge here, it becomes nearer to the larger charge here. It has to be on the nearer to the smaller charge. So if charges are on the opposite side, it has to be placed somewhere like this at a distance x here. So if I place charge q here, so basically what is the equation we'll get here? Q divided by x square has to be equal to 4q divided by square of the distance x plus d whole square. That's the equation we form. So this is a very simple question and we can just easily recap that part. Okay. Let's look at some more question and a basic understanding. Four equal charges minus q are placed on the four corners of a square. And the question what they're asking is, charge small q is placed at the center. What has to be the value of q so that entire system remains in equilibrium? What does system remaining equilibrium mean? Every single charge will experience a net force of 0. How do I find the value of Q so that if I call this charge A, and let's take charge at B, the charge B to remain 0. What for? See, this charge minus Q at B will experience four forces. It will experience force due to charge A, due to charge this charge, let's call C charge, and D charge, and also this charge. So one way of solving this question is, before this charge was placed, it was experiencing four forces. Let's find the resultant of those four forces. Before this charge was placed, it was experiencing three forces due to this one, and this one. Let's find the resultant force due to this three. So when we close this charge, small q, it should exert an equal and opposite force. So let's first find out force due to force on B due to A, due to C, and due to D. All are same charges, forcibly repulsive. So this force will be F. If this magnitude is F, this also will be F, and this force is F dash. And very easily you can calculate resultant here. These two F resultant will become 2F along the diagonal. So resultant force becomes F dash in terms of magnitude into root 2F. And what is F dash here? K into K, product of charge, K into minus Q divided by the square of distance. And if the side is equal to four side of pair, if side is equal to whatever side is A here, it will be root 2A square plus root 2 of force between these two charges, 2 into K into minus Q will get cancelled. So this is the resultant force. And if I place charge Q, force between minus Q charge and Q charge should have magnitude equal to this sum of these two, and we can calculate. And if force on B is 0, we can easily understand for symmetry, force on charge A, B, other charges also become 0. So there are very simple ones. And another common question is when we suspend two particles having some charge with a string. So two masses, let's say first we assume here, this is the mass M, and this has a charge Q here. This mass also is M, and this also is a charge Q. They are suspended with string of equal length, and when we suspend, they come into equilibrium at a particular angle theta here. How are all these parameters related? If it is in equilibrium, it means this particle also in a state of equilibrium. Net forces must be equal to 0. So let's analyze this as system here. What are the forces acting on this particle? Uh, Forces acting is due to Earth's gravity, mg, and electrostatic force. Okay, and then tension. So if I draw a free body diagram will be like this: electrostatic force, mg, and tension, which will act an angle theta. So there are two ways of analyzing. Either I can make net force 0, or I can understand if there are three forces acting, sum of these two forces should be equal and opposite to third force. So this angle also, if I take resultant of Fe and mg, resultant should make an angle theta here. So what is tangent theta here? Angle it will make from the horizontal will be equal to Fe, horizontal force, divided by vertical force. So that's angle theta it will make, and we can calculate. What are important thing to understand here? Let's understand variation. What happens if one charge is q and other charge is 2q? Will this angle theta 1 and theta 2 be equal or unequal? Let's think of it. If one charge is q, both masses are same. Charges are only not same. So will this angle theta be equal or unequal? See, what you notice in both cases, downward force acting is mg, and horizontal force acting also is Fe. So both the particles here, the vertical force as well as horizontal force, excluding tension. Well, this is equal. This is tension is nothing but equal and opposite to resultant of these two. I'm just using this principle here. Since horizontal force and vertical force are same, so even if charges are unequal, both will make equal angle from vertical. So this is one case when the charges were unequal. What happens if charges are equal but mass are unequal? One mass is m, other mass is 2m. Will they make equal angle? They will not make equal angle. In that case, horizontal force is same on both the particles, but vertical force is not the same. And in that case, what we'll find? In tangent of theta is equal to horizontal force divided by the vertical force. If this one is 2m, in that case, vertical force is more. So whichever mass is more, theta 2 will be smaller than theta 1. So you increase the weight here. If one of the weight is increased, it will make a smaller angle. What will happen? So understand with all cases are based on equilibrium. Let's also understand what happens if it is suspended and if it is given an upward acceleration of a naught. How would this angle theta change? What effect upward acceleration of a naught will have on angle theta? If we give an acceleration, upward acceleration a naught, what effect does it have? If we give an upward acceleration a naught here, we can always replace g with equal to g factor. G will become g plus a naught here. So g value, if we give upward acceleration, effectively g value will increase here. We can write step by step also, it comes to same conclusion. If g increases, what will happen? If this denominator increases, again that angle will become smaller. We can calculate that part also. So any variation of question of two masses suspended by string are based on equilibrium of each particle. Important point we need to keep in mind: electrostatic force will always be equal and opposite. The gravitational force is not because of this. Gravitational force acting on the two particles is not what you may call pair forces. That is due to gravitational pull. This may be unequal, and we can calculate such questions. Okay. Let's take another variation of the question. If two identical spheres suspended by a string are equal length, they make certain angle with each other. What happens when we submerge them in liquid? So if we draw a figure, it's just something like this. So you have two masses here, and okay. It is suspended charge particle with some mass. It is suspended identical particles, and it is making some angle here. So this is MQ, and this also is MQ. It is making certain angle. It is making certain angle, and electrostatic force is acting like this. Mg is acting like this. So what is tangent of theta here? If I write tangent of theta here, this is theta. Again, just to recap, that's the tangent of theta here, which will equal to Fe, which is nothing but horizontal force, and Mg, which is nothing but vertical force. Okay, this is what is happening here. Now, if we submerge the whole thing in a liquid, so if we submerge in a liquid here, under which condition will the angle remain same? When we submerge liquid, see what is the effect of submergence. Because of submergence, first of all, effective weight will change. Because of submergence, two things will happen. First of all, there is a upward force start acting due to force of buoyancy. So that is force of buoyancy effect will happen. And when we submerge into liquid, the liquid will have its own dielectric constant. If liquid has a dielectric constant K, Fe also will become equal to, Fe dash will become equal to K times Fe. Okay. So Fe becomes, sorry, Fe dash becomes Fe divided by K times. So if dielectric constant is K is equal to 2, electrostatic force will become half. If dielectric constant is 3, it becomes 1/3. So it reduces by factor equal to K, and force of buoyancy also reduced by certain factor. For angle theta to remain same, what is the necessary condition? Both should change by the same factor. So again, if the angle remains same, I can write, what is the equation I can write? Mg by Fe. This was the, sorry, uh, Fe by Mg. It was the ratio earlier. After submergence, I can write this term as Fe by K. That becomes net horizontal force. And in denominator, I'll write Mg minus force of buoyancy. And since force of buoyancy, whenever buoyancy is involved, let's write in terms of volume of density. I could have written the same term as Fe divided by rho density into Vg. And this term Fe into by K. And this becomes equal to rho S minus rho L into Vg. So very easily you can get the relationship between density of the liquid and K. So that's the condition for the angle to remain same. So two things here. We understand electrostatic force when it is in vacuum, dielectric constant K is equal to 9 to 10 to the power 9. Any other medium, it will have a dielectric constant. And if dielectric constant is K, force becomes 1 by K times. And dielectric again will come later in case of capacitor. The next question is something like this. If there's a ring of radius 0.1 meter, and this is the ring here, and it is made of a wire. Wire has certain cross section. Ring has a uniform charge pi coulomb. This is uniform charge of pi. So total charge given to the ring is pi coulomb. And its area of cross section is given. Area of cross section of the ring A is given. Its Young's modulus is given. So if we place a charge Q at the center of the ring, so this is given a charge Q here. If I place a charge small q at the center of the ring, what is asked here? What is the change in the radius of the ring when charge Q is placed at the center of the ring? So first of all, why should this radius of ring change if I place a small q, charge small q here? We understand moment is change plus q are already due to this charge here, electrostatic force or repulsion will start acting. So everywhere on the ring, every part of the ring will experience a force like this. So whenever, and force will be in the radially outward direction if the charges are of the same sign. When the force is acting, radial force is acting like this, it will create tension in the ring. So basically, if I think step by step, effect of Q will create a radially outward force, radially outward force on the ring, outward electrostatic force on the ring. This electrostatic force will create tension in the ring. What is tension in the ring? I will again not repeat. The tension in the ring will be equal to force per unit length into R. That's the tension. What is force per unit length? Force per unit length will be, we are just calculating magnitude. The force per unit length will equal to K into charge per unit length. And what will the charge per unit length? Charge per unit length will be equal to Q divided by 2 pi into radius of the ring. This is charge per unit length into K. This is force per unit length divided by R square into R. This is force per unit length. Again, to repeat, how would I calculate force per unit length? If charge per unit length is lambda, force per unit length will be equal to K times lambda into Q by R square. So we just calculate lambda here, we calculate lambda here, and that's substituted. We get the tension here. So tension is created. What is effect of the tension here? The tension here will create stress and will create a strain. So there is a purpose because of stress here. There's a strain. What is the strain equal to? The strain is equal to delta L by L, which is equal to stress by Y. So if tension is T, we divide by area of the ring here, area of the ring A here, and Y, I get the strain. And whatever strain we have in the length of the ring here, similar strain in all dimension, that will be equal to delta R by R. I get the value of delta R. So these are sequence of steps. Yes, Alan?
Sir, there will be a repulsions between the charge on the ring.
Yeah, very good question. I am happy that you asked that question. See, even before this charge was placed, was there some tension in the ring? Yes, there was already some tension in the ring, and already original dimension of ring has changed. We are not asking what change has happened because of tension given, a charge Q is given to ring. We are talking about change in the radius. Are you understand them now?
Yes, sir.
Your question is very correct. Initially, it had some radius. When we give charge, even then tension will develop. That tension is not easy to calculate. So already there was a tension. We are talking about increase in tension, delta T. And that's what it will come to. Okay. And next question is something like, okay, yeah. Okay, next one. I know somehow I wrote this and sometimes it is written. A charge Q is placed at this point. Find the electric field at a particular point. How do you find electric field in vector form? So let's do one question so that we are clear about such calculation. So, and this, if it has come in vector forms, again to repeat something similar I mentioned in case of force, just imagine there's a point where Q has some coordinate system. Charge Q is placed at some point. Charge Q is placed, and we want to calculate field at some other point P here. And what we should always understand, any charge Q placed in the space, it creates field at all points in the space. I want to calculate field at point P. Field at point P will have a magnitude equal to, we know that K Q by R square. Only thing important is in terms of vector, what is the direction? So direction is equal to unit vector. Unit vector will be in which direction? Unit vector R directed from Q towards P. Directed from, what is the direction? From Q towards P. So how do we write that vector form? If this position, this vector will be equal to, so what is vector from this point to this point? It will be equal to RP vector minus RQ vector. This divided by RP minus RQ is the unit vector. So let's do in this case also, if you have to find here, what is given? RQ vector is given and RP vector is given. So can we find RP minus RQ, which is the position vector? What is RP minus RQ? I can use the term position vector of point P with reference to charge. This term is nothing, position vector of point P with reference to charge Q. So what is RPQ equal to? RP minus RQ. So this is point P. So this 0 minus 1 minus I cap. Then minus 4 minus 2 minus 6 J cap. and 3 minus 4 minus k cap. What does this indicate? This indicates position vector of P with reference to charge Q. So the distance between the two, R becomes equal to root of 38. And unit vector becomes equal to, what is the unit vector I need to take? Unit vector I have to take equal to unit vector minus I cap minus 6j cap minus k cap divided by root 38. So I'll substitute all the values here. So when I write field vector here, field will be equal to kq by r square into the unit vector. So I know we can find. So very simple, step by step we can find in the unit vector. So in terms of understanding, those are very, very clear. What is this r cap here? R cap is unit vector towards P with reference to Q. Two charges are placed on the x-axis. These are charge Q1 and Q2. And this is how the electric field is plotted against X. So what is plotted on the Y direction is electric field, and upward direction indicates so this is how electric fields are. Based on this electric field, if we have to find what are things we can find here, we can find what is the sign of Q1. Can we find sign of each charge? What is sign of Q1? What is sign of Q2? And find the relative strength among the two, which has higher magnitude, relative strength. So we need to find between Q1 and Q2, which has higher magnitude. Can we get all this information from this graph here? So first of all, those who have little difficulty, let's understand what does this graph mean. This graph means, first of all, when we talk about one important point, what we need to always keep in mind. See, if I choose a point very close to charge Q1 here, so this point Q here, whichever point I've chosen here, if I have to calculate field at point P, which is just left of charge Q1 here, it will have field due to Q1 also, it will have field due to Q2 also. But here, since it is very near to Q1, field due to Q1 will be much larger compared to field due to Q2. In the denominator, there's a square of the distance. So field very near to a charge is determined by the charge alone. So here, if point P, what is the direction of field given as per the graph? As this figure tells you, just left of Q1, field is positive. So just left of Q1, field is like this. And just right of Q1, what is the direction of field? Field is negative. So this is how the field is near Q1. Field is directed towards Q1. So what is the sign of charge Q1 here? Sign of charge Q1 is negative because field is directed towards charge Q1 here. Similarly, so I understood charge Q1 is negative. How did I find out? Based on field near to the charge. I come to charge Q2 here. Just left of Q2, what is the direction of field? Direction of field is negative. Just left of charge, and the direction of field is negative. And what is the direction of field just right of Q2? Direction of field is, sorry, what I have done. What I'm saying here. Just left of Q2, direction of field is negative. So how do I mark this is direction of field? Just right of Q, direction of field is positive. So here fields are away from the charge. It means field is, this charge Q2 is positive. So from field very close to the charge, we can find out direction of, we can find the sign of charge. Next, how do we find out relative strength? Relative strength, we look at which is the null point here. Do we spot a null point here? Where's the null point? Null point is the point where field becomes zero. The field line, where is the field zero here? If I look at, where is this? This is the point where field is zero. Where does the null point occur? Null point is occurring closer to Q2. It means in terms of magnitude, Q2 has a smaller magnitude compared to Q1. So whenever we have field versus X kind of graph for two charges here, we can understand the sign of the charge based on the direct field close to the charge. We can find the relative strength of the charge based on the position of null point. Null point will always occur. If null point occurs in between the two charges, it indicates both charges are of the same sign. If the null point is occurring outside, not between the two charges, it will occur. It means, first of all, two are of the opposite sign, and it will always happen closer to the smaller charge. Okay, so I'll stop here for take a small break. Anyway, throat is giving some trouble, so I'll take a small break, have some tea, and then again restart after 10 minutes.